Ethan's boots sank slightly into the soft violet soil as he walked carefully across the alien landscape. The planet was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering crystalline trees shimmered in the pale sunlight, their branches swaying even though there was no wind. Strange, glowing insects moved in patterns above the ground, painting trails of light. The air smelled faintly metallic, tinged with something sweet that reminded him of Earth's spring flowers. Ethan had been sent by the Galactic Exploration Corps to study this planet, catalog its flora and fauna, and determine whether it could support human life. It was supposed to be routine, but from the moment he stepped off the shuttle, he felt that this world held secrets, some that were curious, some that might be dangerous. As he carefully moved forward, his scanner beeped softly. A figure appeared in the distance, moving silently among the crystals. Ethan froze. The figure looked humanoid, but the skin had a soft, pearlescent glow that reflected the sunlight. Her eyes were large, almond-shaped, and a shade of green that seemed to shift with the light. She wore simple garments woven from natural fibers that flowed around her as she moved. Every instinct Ethan had told him to be cautious, yet he felt drawn to her. The alien woman noticed him as well. She stopped, tilting her head slightly, her eyes observing him carefully. There was no fear in her gaze, only a strange, intense curiosity. Ethan lifted his hand slowly, a universal gesture of peace. "I'm Ethan," he said softly, unsure of the exact language protocol. "I come in peace." The alien didn't speak. She merely studied him, her expression unreadable. Ethan remembered the translator device on his wrist. He activated it and spoke slowly. "I am a human explorer. I mean no harm." Still no reply. Ethan realized that communication would not be simple. The alien's body language was different from anything he had encountered. She seemed both cautious and curious. Every movement was precise, as if she had learned to survive in a harsh world where every step mattered. Ethan took another cautious step forward, holding out a hand not to touch, but as a sign of goodwill. "I don't know your name," he said, "but I'd like to be friends." The alien woman's eyes flickered slightly, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw the faintest hint of a smile. Then she stepped back, disappearing behind a crystal formation. Ethan's heart raced. He had hoped for a better reception, but he understood her caution. This world was not like Earth. Trust could not be given freely. He continued walking, keeping the crystals between them. He noticed signs of life's small burrows and tracks in the soil, but there was no immediate danger. As he moved, he tried to keep calm, remembering his training. Observation was key. And so, he observed. Hours passed as Ethan walked across the alien plains. He began cataloging strange plants and creatures, noting which ones were edible, which ones were dangerous, and which ones might have medicinal properties. All the while, he felt the alien woman's presence. He could sense her watching from a distance, sometimes just at the edge of the crystals, sometimes disappearing entirely, only to reappear later as evening approached. The planet's twin suns began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows that made the crystals sparkle like a sea of stars. Ethan decided to set up camp. He activated a small force field around a flat area and deployed his gear. While setting up, he felt the alien watching him again. Finally, he spoke softly, hoping to reach her without alarming her. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I just want to understand your world. Can you talk to me?" The alien woman stepped out fully into the clearing this time. Ethan froze, not wanting to frighten her. She looked at him, her head tilted slightly. Then, in a soft, melodic voice that seemed to resonate in his mind, she spoke a single word. It was not in any language he recognized, but somehow the translator caught it. "Why?" Ethan smiled gently. "Because your world is beautiful," he said. Then, without thinking, he whispered almost instinctively, "And so are you." The moment the words left his lips, the alien woman froze. Her large eyes widened, and she took a step backward. Ethan immediately realized he had said something personal, something unexpected. He had not meant to frighten her. He had only meant to express respect and admiration. For what felt like a long time, she did not move. Then slowly, she lowered her gaze, staring at the ground. Ethan felt a strange tension in the air. He had never encountered a reaction like this from any being human, alien, or otherwise. "I didn't mean to," Ethan began, but she raised a hand, signaling him to stop. He paused. Sometimes silence spoke louder than words. She took a step to the side, then another. Her movements were cautious, but deliberate. Ethan stayed perfectly still, giving her space. He understood instinctively that trust could not be rushed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke again. "Human, why do you say such things?" Ethan thought carefully. "Because I mean it," he replied simply. "I've never seen anyone like you. Your strength, your grace, it matters." She tilted her head, processing his words. There was a softness in her expression now, a hint of curiosity mixed with confusion. Ethan realized she had never received a genuine compliment before. That explained her reaction. The sun dipped lower, bathing the clearing in golden light. Ethan realized he should prepare for nightfall. The planet's dangers were unknown, and he needed to be cautious. "I will make camp for the night," he said. "If you wish, you may stay nearby. I promise to keep my distance." The alien woman studied him, then nodded slightly, a subtle gesture he interpreted as agreement. She disappeared behind a crystal formation, watching him from a safe distance as he prepared a small meal and settled into his shelter. Ethan's thoughts drifted back to her. There was something extraordinary about this being. She was cautious, intelligent, and capable. Yet she had reacted to a simple expression of admiration in a way that showed depth he had never expected. He wondered how many others had tried to understand her and failed. Night fell quickly. The twin moons rose, casting silvery light across the plains. Ethan kept his scanner active, not because he felt danger immediately, but because he had learned to respect this world and its unknowns. In the distance, he thought he saw her silhouette against the sparkling crystals. She was watching him, and somehow that knowledge brought him a sense of calm. Sleep came slowly. Ethan dreamed of vast alien landscapes and the strange glow of the woman's eyes. In his dream, she spoke to him, though he could not understand the words. Yet he felt their meaning not in language, but in emotion. Courage, curiosity, and something gentle. Morning arrived with a gentle breeze that carried the metallic sweet scent of the flora. Ethan awoke to find the alien woman closer than before, her eyes fixed on him, studying. He smiled softly and offered a hand. "I will not hurt you," he said. "I only wish to learn about you, about this planet." She did not move closer immediately, but she did not step back either. Instead, she tilted her head and made a soft hum that his translator could not interpret. Ethan smiled again. It was the beginning of something neither of them fully understood. Two beings from completely different worlds, drawn together by curiosity, courage, and the quiet power of a single honest word. Beautiful. As the suns climbed higher, Ethan packed his equipment. He knew he could not stay in one place for long. The planet held many secrets, and he wanted to discover them all. Yet, he could not ignore the pull he felt toward the alien woman, nor the curiosity in her gaze that seemed to mirror his own. And so, with careful steps and open heart, Ethan began walking once more. Glancing back occasionally to see if she followed, she did not speak, but her eyes never left him. In that unspoken connection, a bridge began to form between human and aliena, bridge built on trust, admiration, and the simple power of a whispered word. The first day had ended, but their story was only beginning. Morning light spilled across the crystalline plains, casting a soft shimmer over the violet soil. Ethan adjusted his backpack and checked his scanner. Nothing unusual yet, but he knew this planet had a way of surprising explorers. He rose to his feet and stretched. The alien woman, Lyra, was nearby, though she stayed hidden behind a formation of crystal spires. Her eyes watched him carefully, alert yet hesitant. Ethan spoke softly, trying not to scare her. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." He paused, unsure if she would respond. She didn't speak, but her gaze lingered on him longer than before. He smiled and decided to give her space. Knowing that patience was essential, he packed up his small camp, storing food and equipment. The day ahead promised exploration of a nearby valley that his scanner had marked as potentially rich in life forms. As he moved, Lyra followed, staying out of sight but never letting him leave her view. There was a strange rhythm to her movements, silent, careful, almost like a predator observing a creature it could not yet understand. The first hazard came sooner than expected. A sudden rustling in the violet foliage caused Ethan to freeze. His scanner detected movement, large, fast, and approaching quickly. From between the crystalline trees, a creature emerged. It had 4 legs, thick black scales, and eyes that glowed a fierce orange. Its jaws opened wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth. It charged. Ethan reacted immediately. He raised his pulse blaster, but the creature was too close. Just as it lunged toward him, a blur of motion shot past. Lyra appeared from nowhere, her long limbs moving with speed and precision. She landed between Ethan and the predator, her body twisting as she dodged. The creature's claws and kicked it back with surprising force. Ethan stumbled but stayed upright. He could hardly believe what he had seen. Lyra, who had appeared so fragile in the morning light, now moved with the power and agility of a trained warrior. The creature roared, stunned by her unexpected strength. Before retreating into the shadows of the crystal forest, for a long moment, Ethan just stared. "You saved me," he whispered, awe in his voice. Lyra's chest heaved slightly as she caught her breath. Her large green eyes, now glowing faintly, studied him. She did not speak at first. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "You should have been careful. This world is dangerous." Ethan smiled, trying to hide his surprise. "I know," he said. "But thank you. For saving me, I owe you." Lyra froze for a moment, the memory of his whispered words from the first encounter flashing in her mind. "You're beautiful." She had reacted then with fear and confusion. Now, she felt something different, an unfamiliar warmth that had nothing to do with danger. She averted her eyes, unsure how to handle it. "You are not like the others," she said finally, almost to herself. Ethan tilted his head. "Others. The others," she repeated. "They come. They take. They lie. You do not." Ethan understood immediately. "I try to be honest," he said simply, "and I try to respect everyone. I don't want to hurt you or anyone else on this planet." Lyra's gaze softened slightly. She nodded, a small gesture, and turned to continue forward. Ethan followed, careful not to crowd her. He had learned already that trust could not be forced. The valley ahead was alive with strange life. Ethereal plants swayed even without wind, and small luminescent animals darted through the crystal trees. Ethan marveled, taking notes and scanning the surroundings. Lyra stayed close, silent, but he could feel her presence guiding him away from dangers he had not yet detected. Hours passed. Ethan paused near a stream of glowing liquid, marveling at its color. "This water is incredible," he said. "It could help humans adapt to this planet." Lyra crouched by the edge of the stream, touching the water lightly with her hand. Her skin seemed to shimmer against the light. She looked at him briefly, then back at the stream. "This world, it is home to me," she said. "I know every danger, every path, every hiding place." Ethan nodded, impressed. "You are amazing," he said, smiling. Then, without thinking, he whispered again, "You're incredible." Lyra froze once more. Her eyes widened, and she looked away. Her ears sore, the sensitive ridges on her head flicking slightly in surprise. This time, however, the feeling was not fear. It was curiosity, a soft tug at the part of her heart she had kept closed for so long. "You speak strangely," she said softly. "Humans speak words with power I do not understand." Ethan shrugged, smiling gently. "We often mean what we say. Sometimes words are more than just sounds. They carry truth." Lyra thought about this. She had never encountered such honesty. The other species she had met on this planet or beyond had always spoken with ulterior motives. Yet Ethan's words, quiet and steady, seemed to carry something real. Their journey continued, and soon the valley grew darker as clouds gathered above. A sudden storm broke, and rain fell in heavy sheets, turning the violet soil slick and treacherous. Ethan struggled to keep his footing. Lyra, in contrast, moved with grace and ease, guiding him through safe paths, her hands occasionally brushing his arm to steady him. As they reached a cave for shelter, Ethan looked at her with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he said honestly. Lyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting the dim light of the cave. She felt something she could not name. Humans were fragile, yet this one showed courage, respect, and a strange kindness. She wanted to trust him, but old habits of caution lingered. They spent the night in the cave. Ethan shared dried food from his pack, offering some to her. Lyra hesitated, then accepted it. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and for the first time, a silent understanding passed between them. "I have never had anyone care like this," Lyra admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan smiled softly. "Then perhaps it is time you did," he replied gently. The night was quiet except for the soft sound of rain and the occasional distant roar of unknown creatures. Neither spoke for hours, yet both felt the growing connection. Trust was forming, slowly, carefully, between the human and the alien woman. By morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight broke through the clouds, and the valley was bathed in sparkling light. Ethan packed his equipment again, ready to continue exploring. Lyra stepped outside the cave, watching him. "I will follow," she said. "But not too close," Ethan nodded. "I understand, and I will respect that." As they walked together, side by side but with space between them, Ethan felt a quiet hope. There was something extraordinary about Lyra, something that went beyond strength or beauty. There was intelligence, courage, and an honesty that he had rarely seen. And Lyra, walking beside this human who had whispered words that shook her heart, felt something new as well. She did not yet understand it fully, but she knew it was important. Humans were strange, unpredictable, and fragile, but they could also be brave, kind, and genuine. As the day stretched on, Ethan and Lyra moved deeper into the valley. Strange creatures watched them from a distance, and alien plants rustled as though whispering secrets. Ethan occasionally glanced at Lyra, noting her careful movements and keen senses. He realized that they made a good team not because they were similar, but because their differences complemented each other perfectly by evening. They reached a small plateau overlooking the valley. Ethan looked out at the alien horizon, feeling a mix of awe and respect. He had survived the first dangers of this planet, but the presence of Lyra had changed something. He no longer felt alone. Lyra, standing a few steps behind him, watched silently. The words he had whispered lingered in her mind. She did not freeze this time, not completely. Instead, she felt a flutter of something new, something fragile and unfamiliar. Perhaps it was trust. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the start of something she had never allowed herself to feel. Ethan turned to her and smiled. "We make a good team," he said simply. Lyra met his gaze for the first time without hesitation. "Yes," she replied. "We do," and for the first time, the alien woman did not freeze at the human's words. She only felt them deeply and allowed herself to wonder what might come next. The sun had barely risen when Ethan and Lyra continued their journey deeper into the valley. The air was crisp and filled with the faint hum of alien life. Strange plants glowed faintly, casting shifting patterns across the violet soil. Ethan adjusted his backpack, careful not to disturb the delicate environment. He had learned to tread lightly on this planet, but he now realized Lyra's presence added a level of awareness he had never felt alone. Lyra moved ahead with grace, her large eyes scanning the surroundings constantly. Even when Ethan could not see any danger, she seemed to notice everything, the subtle shift of shadows, a barely perceptible movement among the crystals, the faintest sound of approaching creatures. Ethan marveled at her instincts. Humans were good at machines, at strategy, at adapting, but Lyra moved with a connection to this planet that no human could hope to match. "Lyra," Ethan called softly, "can you show me how you see the world?" I want to understand your senses. She paused, tilting her head. For a moment, she seemed unsure. Then she nodded, gesturing for him to follow her to a cluster of luminous plants. Watch, she said. Do not rely only on your eyes or ears. Feel. Everything. Ethan crouched beside her, trying to focus. He noticed subtle vibrations in the soil. The way light reflected off surfaces differently depending on movement, and even a faint scent carried by the air. Lyra explained each observation in a soft voice, and Ethan tried to copy her techniques. It was exhausting, but fascinating. He realized he had been seeing only part of the planet's life. With her guidance, he began to understand how interconnected everything was. Suddenly, the ground trembled slightly. Ethan froze. Lyra's ears the sensitive ridges on her head twitched, and her eyes narrowed. From a distance, dark shapes moved among the crystal trees. Ethan activated his scanner and frowned. Several large creatures, unlike anything he had cataloged before, were approaching fast. Their movements were coordinated, almost like they were hunting. Stay close, Lyra whispered. Do not panic. Follow me. She led him through narrow passages between the crystals, her steps light and deliberate. Ethan struggled to keep up, but he relied on her guidance. The creatures were fast, their glowing eyes reflecting the sunlight in an eerie display. Ethan realized they were predators, intelligent enough to coordinate their attack. Without Lyra, he might not have escaped. Finally, they reached a small canyon that provided temporary cover. The creatures slowed, scanning the area. Ethan breathed heavily, heart pounding. Lyra crouched beside him. We cannot fight them openly, she said. We must outsmart them, Ethan nodded. He had faced dangerous creatures before, but nothing like this. He studied the terrain and noticed a series of natural bridges formed by crystalline outcroppings. We can use those, he whispered. They might not follow us up there. Lyra's eyes gleamed. Good, she said softly. Follow me exactly. They moved silently, stepping from one crystalline bridge to another. Ethan kept his blaster ready, though he knew it was more a precaution than a solution. Lyra moved like a shadow, her body perfectly balanced, her every motion precise. Ethan marveled at her skill. She was unlike any being he had encountered, strong, clever, and fearless. The creatures below growled, snapping at the bridges, but could not follow. Ethan felt a thrill of relief. We made it, he whispered. Lyra nodded, though her gaze remained on the creatures below. Danger is never far here, she said. You must always be ready, but you are learning quickly. Ethan smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his face. I'm learning from the best, he said sincerely. Then, without thinking, he whispered, and I trust you. Lyra froze for a brief moment, the words hitting her in a way she did not expect. She had never heard such direct honesty from another being. The humans she had observed or encountered before often spoke carefully with hidden motives. But Ethan's words were simple, pure, and real. She felt a warmth she did not understand, yet it was not frightening. The two continued their journey. As they moved, Ethan asked about her life, her home, and how she had survived alone on this planet. Lyra was cautious, but began to share small pieces of her story. She spoke of a world that had once been safer, of others like her who had vanished, and of the harsh lessons she had learned. Ethan listened intently, offering gentle encouragement without pressing for details she was not ready to share. You humans. You are patient, she said quietly. Most others would have demanded answers or tried to control me. I try to understand before judging, Ethan replied. Everyone has a story. Everyone deserves respect. Her eyes softened. There was something in his tone, a sincerity that she could not ignore. Slowly, she began to trust him, not fully, but enough to move closer when he offered assistance or guidance. The bond between them, though fragile, was growing. Hours later, he reached a plateau that overlooked a valley filled with shimmering flora and creatures Ethan had never seen before. He could feel the hum of life in every corner, the subtle energy that seemed to pulse from the planet itself. Lyra stood beside him, silent, but he could feel her presence, steady and reassuring. You feel it too? Ethan asked. Lyra nodded. Yes, the life, the energy. It is strong here. It can guide you or mislead you. You must be careful. Ethan took out his scanner and began documenting the valley. This place, it's incredible. With your guidance, I could learn so much. Maybe even help others understand it. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Why do you help? You could just explore and leave. Many humans do not care beyond their own goals. Ethan smiled softly. Because understanding matters. Respect matters. And because some things are worth protecting, even if you are not sure why at first. Her eyes flickered, reflecting the sunlight. Perhaps you are different, she said. Perhaps. Humans are not all the same. They continued their exploration, encountering small creatures and peculiar plants along the way. Ethan tried to document everything, but he soon realized that some things could not be captured by machines or words. The way Lyra moved, the way she reacted to the environment. Even the simple glances exchanged between the MIT was all part of the understanding of this world. By evening, they found a small cave near a waterfall of glowing liquid. The sound of the water echoed softly, and the glow reflected off the crystals around them. Ethan set up camp, preparing a simple meal, while Lyra observed quietly from the entrance. You humans? You are strange, Lyra said softly. You live in fragile bodies, yet you risk so much. Why? Ethan shrugged, smiling gently. Maybe because we believe some things are worth the risk. Friendship, trust, understanding, and sometimes admiration. Lyra blinked. Admiration? Ethan nodded. Yes, I admire those who are brave, strong, and true to themselves. And I admire you. He hesitated, then whispered again, almost instinctively, You're incredible. Lyra froze, her large eyes widening. But this time, she did not retreat. The words stirred something inside her, feeling of recognition, curiosity, and perhaps a hint of something deeper. She did not understand why she felt drawn to him, yet she could not deny the warmth spreading in her chest. For the first time, she allowed herself to sit closer to him, though still at a respectful distance. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the quiet understanding of shared experience. They watched the glow of the waterfall, the shimmering creatures nearby, and the last rays of the sun reflect across the valley. That night, as Ethan drifted into sleep, he thought of how extraordinary it was to find a companion like Lyra, not just strong, intelligent and agile, but also curious, cautious, and capable of understanding, even if slowly. He realized that the journey ahead would not just be about surviving this planet, but about discovering the depth of connection between two very different beings. Lyra, lying near the cave entrance, watched him sleep. She had never felt this way before, an alien, cautious heart opening to a human she had barely known. The words he had whispered lingered in her mind, echoing like a soft melody she could not shake. They were simple words, yet they carried a power she had never experienced. Trust, admiration, and perhaps the first stirrings of something more. Morning would come soon, and with it new challenges, new creatures, and new discoveries. But for now, in the quiet of the glowing valley, two beings from different worlds rested, connected in a fragile but growing bond. In the whispered words of a human, simple, honest, and brave had begun to awaken something entirely new in the alien woman. The morning sun cast a warm glow across the crystalline valley as Ethan and Lyra prepared to continue their journey. The alien world was alive with movement. The small, glowing creatures scuttled along the ground. The plants swayed, almost as if sensing the presence of the two travelers. Ethan adjusted his pack, checking his equipment one more time, while Lyra moved silently beside him, her eyes scanning the terrain. The day will be long, she said softly, and dangerous. Be ready. Ethan nodded. I've learned to trust your instincts. Let's go. They moved carefully along a narrow canyon path, the cliffs rising sharply on either side. Ethan noticed how Lyra's steps were precise, her balance perfect, even on uneven surfaces. He realized that despite her quiet demeanor, she was constantly alert, constantly analyzing every detail of the environment. He tried to match her pace and focus, knowing that in this world, any mistake could be fatal. Hours passed with only minor obstacles. Strange creatures flitted in and out of sight, but none posed a real threat. Ethan felt a sense of calm despite the constant tension. He had faced dangerous worlds before, but Lyra's presence brought a strange sense of security. He could see now that her caution was not fear, it was understanding. Knowledge and experience honed over years of survival. Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath them. Ethan froze. Lyra's eyes narrowed and she crouched instinctively, her muscles tense. From above, rocks began to tumble down the cliffside. They ducked behind a large outcropping, narrowly avoiding the falling debris. "Stay close," Lyra whispered. "This canyon, it hides more danger than you realize." Ethan followed her movements closely, trying to remain silent. As they rounded a bend, a group of large creatures emerged from the shadows. Their bodies were massive and armored with dark scales, and their glowing eyes reflected the sunlight in an eerie display. They were clearly predators, but something about their movement suggested intelligence. They were hunting, and Ethan and Lyra were in their path. "We cannot fight them head-on," Lyra said softly. "We must outsmart them." Ethan scanned the canyon. There were natural ledges and narrow passages that the creatures might not be able to follow. He nodded. "I see a path over there. We can try to climb the ledges." Lyra led the way, moving with silent precision. Ethan followed, struggling to keep his balance, but trusting her guidance completely. The creatures growled below, snapping their jaws and moving with surprising coordination. Ethan realized that without Lyra, he would not have made it this far. As they climbed higher, the creatures seemed to lose interest in following. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. "That was close," he whispered. Lyra glanced back, her eyes still scanning for danger. "Close enough," she said. "We are not safe yet." The canyon opened into a wider plateau. Ethan looked around, marveling at the alien landscape stretching before him. Strange plants shimmered in the sunlight, and the ground was dotted with glowing pools of liquid. But there was no time to admire the scenery. The creatures below were regrouping, clearly not giving up their hunt. "We need a plan," Ethan said quietly. Lyra studied the terrain. "We can use the environment," she said. "These pools. They are acidic. If we lure the creatures near them, they will hesitate." Ethan nodded. "Let's try it." Together, they moved cautiously, positioning themselves near the pools. Lyra's movements were precise, her focus unwavering. Ethan followed, mimicking her actions as best he could. When the creatures approached, she signaled him, and they carefully guided the predators toward the edge. One of the creatures stepped into a shallow pool, recoiling with a hiss. The others hesitated, giving Ethan and Lyra the chance to move further along the plateau. The predators eventually lost interest and retreated. But the experience left Ethan's heart racing. "You are incredible," he whispered, almost without thinking. Lyra froze for a moment, her eyes wide. Then she looked away, a faint blush coloring her skin. "You speak too much," she said softly, though her voice carried a warmth that suggested something deeper than annoyance. Ethan smiled gently. "I speak because I admire you. You saved me. You guided me. I trust you." Lyra felt her chest tighten slightly. Trust was not easy for her, not with anyone, and yet here was a human fragile, honest, and brave telling her plainly that he trusted her. It was a new feeling, and she did not know how to respond. They continued across the plateau, keeping a careful watch. The predators had gone, but the terrain itself was a new challenge. Jagged crystal spires rose from the ground, and unstable paths threatened to collapse under their weight. Ethan found himself relying more and more on Lyra's guidance, and she noticed. "You were learning quickly," she said. "Not just about survival, but about this world. You think carefully, you observe, you listen." Ethan shrugged. "I learn from the best." He smiled at her, his expression soft. "And from you?" Lyra felt a flutter in her chest, a strange mixture of curiosity, respect, something she had never allowed herself to feel before. She did not respond, but her eyes softened. and she allowed him to walk closer than before. As evening approached, they found a small cave near a glowing river. The sound of flowing liquid echoed softly, and the light reflected off the walls in shimmering patterns. Ethan set up a small camp, preparing food while Lyra watched silently. "You humans. You are strange," Lyra said softly. "You are fragile, yet you take risks. Why?" Ethan shrugged, smiling gently. "Because some things are worth the risk. Friendship, trust, and sometimes admiration." Lyra blinked. "Admiration?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, I admire those who are brave, strong, and true to themselves. And I admire you." Lyra froze for a moment, her heart beating faster. She did not respond immediately, but she did not retreat. The words lingered in the air between them, gentle and powerful. Slowly, she allowed herself to sit closer to him, though still a small distance away. For the first time, the alien woman did not feel fear at his words. Instead, she felt curiosity, warmth, and a connection she could not explain. She was beginning to understand that humans, despite their fragility, could be honest, brave, and capable of forming deep bonds. The night was quiet, filled only with the soft sounds of the river and the glowing plants around them. Ethan glanced at Lyra, noticing the faint shimmer of her skin in the dim light. He realized how extraordinary she was: strong, intelligent, and capable of surviving in a world that would have destroyed most beings. And yet, despite her strength, there was something fragile and beautiful about her. Something that made him want to protect her. Not because she needed it, but because he wanted to. Lyra, lying near the cave entrance, watched him sleep. The words he had whispered earlier echoed in her mind. She did not fully understand them, but she felt their truth. Trust, admiration, and perhaps something deeper were stirring inside her. Morning would come with new challenges, new creatures, and new discoveries. But for now, in the quiet of the glowing valley, two beings from different worlds rested, connected in a fragile but growing bond, and the whispered words of a human simple, honest and brave, had begun to awaken something entirely new in the alien woman. The morning sun bathed the valley in soft light, reflecting off the crystals and turning the ground into a sea of sparkling violet. Ethan and Lyra prepared to continue their journey. Both had grown stronger together over the past days, Ethan learning to move carefully and observe the world like Lyra, and Lyra slowly learning to trust the human beside her. "I can feel danger ahead," Lyra said softly, her eyes scanning the distant horizon. Ethan nodded. "Then we face it together." The path ahead led them to a narrow bridge of crystal stretching across a deep chasm. The air shimmered with heat, and below, the valley extended endlessly, dotted with glowing pools and strange vegetation. They began to cross carefully, but midway, the bridge trembled slightly under their weight. Suddenly, a group of large armored creatures emerged from the shadows, blocking their path. Their eyes glowed orange, and their jaws snapped as they advanced. Ethan's pulse quickened. These creatures were larger and more coordinated than any they had faced before. Lyra placed a hand on his arm. "Stay calm. We must act carefully." Ethan nodded. He had learned to rely on her instincts. "What do we do?" he whispered. Lyra's eyes scanned the environment. She pointed toward the far side of the bridge. "There is a narrow path through the rocks. We can use it to flank them, but we must move together." Ethan followed her lead. Their movements were coordinated, silent, precise. Lyra guided him through the rocky passage, and they crept behind the creatures. Ethan marveled at her skill. She moved like the wind, graceful, controlled, and utterly confident. When they reached a safe vantage point, Ethan whispered, "You are amazing. I don't know how you do all this." Lyra froze briefly, then turned her gaze toward him. "I have survived here alone. Until now. You help me. In ways I do not yet understand." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. He had never known a connection like this, a bond that grew stronger with each shared danger. He gave her a gentle smile. "Then we help each other. That is all it is." From their vantage point, they could see the creatures beginning to move again. Ethan's blaster hummed softly in his hands, but Lyra held up a hand. "We will not fight unless we must." Watch and learn. Using their knowledge of the terrain, they began to manipulate the creature's movements. Ethan observed as Lyra triggered small rock slides and led the predators into narrow passages where their size worked against them. It was a careful, delicate dance, and Ethan realized he had never seen a being so skilled in using both the environment and intelligence to survive. Hours passed as they outmaneuvered the creatures. By late afternoon, the last predator had been driven away. Ethan exhaled deeply, a smile spreading across his face. "We did it," he said, feeling exhilarated. Lyra glanced at him, her large eyes reflecting both relief and curiosity. Yes, together. For the first time, they stopped moving and allowed themselves a moment of rest. Ethan offered her some of his food, and she accepted without hesitation. They sat side by side, quietly observing the valley below. "You humans. You speak strange words," Lyra said after a while. "You use them. To comfort, to express, to connect. I do not fully understand, but I feel them." Ethan smiled. "Words are powerful," he said gently. "They can show respect, admiration, even trust. And sometimes they can show something more." Lyra tilted her head. "Something more?" "Yes," Ethan said softly. "Something beyond what is needed to survive. Something that makes life brighter." He hesitated, then whispered, almost instinctively, "You're beautiful." Lyra froze, but this time she did not retreat. She felt the words deeply, a warmth spreading through her chest. She met his gaze, and for the first time, she did not turn away. Her heart, long closed to trust, opened just a little. "You speak too much," she said softly, though there was a faint smile in her eyes. Ethan chuckled quietly. "Perhaps, but I mean every word." Lyra's smile grew slightly, and she allowed herself to sit closer to him. The distance that had always existed between them, the distance of caution, fear, and mistrust, began to fade. The evening sky turned gold and purple as the twin suns of the planet began to set. Ethan and Lyra watched together, a quiet peace settling over them. For a moment, neither spoke. The world around them was alive with subtle sounds, the whisper of wind across crystals, faint calls of distant creatures, and the soft glow of plants reflecting the sunlight. "You are different," Lyra said finally, breaking the silence. "I did not expect this, not from a human." Ethan turned to her, his eyes soft. "Different can be good," he said. "Sometimes it is the differences that make connections strong." Lyra considered his words, feeling them resonate deep inside her. She had never encountered honesty like this, never felt admiration without hidden motives, never known trust so freely given. She realized that humans, fragile, unpredictable, and brave, could offer something no other species had: openness. Night fell, and the stars appeared above the crystalline valley. Ethan and Lyra settled in for the night, sitting close together near the glowing river. Ethan wrapped a small protective shield around them for warmth and safety. Lyra watched him, noticing how his presence made her feel safe, not because she needed protection, but because she wanted to trust him. "You humans," she said quietly, "you risk so much. You care, even when it is not expected. I have never known this before." Ethan reached out a hand, gently touching hers. "You do not need to fear it," he said. "I am here, and I will not leave. Not now, not ever." Lyra's chest rose and fell rapidly. She had never heard promises like this. She had learned to rely only on herself. But now, she felt something she had long denied: a willingness to share her life, her world, and her heart. For the first time, she leaned slightly closer to him. "Then, perhaps, we can face this world together," she said softly. Ethan smiled, his heart swelling. "Yes, together." The night was calm, the air filled with the hum of the valley. Ethan and Lyra sat in quiet companionship, two beings from different worlds, bound by trust, admiration, and a growing understanding. Their journey had begun with a whispered word, a moment that had startled and frozen Lyra, but now It had grown into something neither of them could ignore. Morning would bring new challenges. There would be unknown creatures, difficult terrain, and the need to survive on this alien planet. But they would face it side by side, stronger together than they had ever been apart. And the whispered words of a human simple, honest and brave, had changed the course of both their lives. Lyra no longer froze at his words. Instead, she embraced them, understanding that sometimes the right words could open doors to trust, courage, and connection. The alien woman and the human explorer rose together, ready to face whatever the planet held. They walked forward, side by side, knowing that their bond built on trust, respect, and the quiet power of simple words would guide them through whatever dangers awaited. In the distance, the valley stretched endlessly, a world of beauty, mystery, and danger. But with each other, they had found more than survival. They had found friendship, admiration, the beginnings of something far more extraordinary. A connection that transcended species, language, and fear. And as the twin suns rose higher, bathing the valley in warm light, Ethan whispered again softly, "To Lyra, you're beautiful." Lyra smiled, no longer frozen, and replied simply, "And so are you." Together, they walked onward, into the unknown, their bond stronger than any obstacle the universe could place in their path.